Hi, everyone. We're back from Ambit. I'm Apurva Dave. I'm here with Mark Kraynak from Acrew Capital. Mark, it's great to see you. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Great to be here. Excited to be a part of Ambit.
Thank you. We are so excited to have you as part of the team. For those of you who don't know, Mark and Acrew just led Ambit Series A. We raised $25 million. Our existing funders, Ballistic, 1011, Octa Ventures, CrowdStrike Falcon Fund, they all participated, but Mark was leading the charge, carrying the flag, and we really appreciate that for you, and we appreciate your support. Why don't we just, first of all, learn a little bit about each other? I want to learn about you. I would love to know a little bit about you and maybe some of the other investments that you've made.
Yeah. So my background is enterprise security. I tell everybody I've been in enterprise B2B security my whole life. The one tangent that is a little bit off there is a couple of decades ago, I got a graduate degree in poetry, which I use every day. But I've been a full-time investor now for about 7 years. Some of our other investments that I've been a part of are Cato Networks, which a lot of people might know, at Bay, which maybe less in the cybersecurity world. They do cybersecurity insurance and now some cybersecurity along with it to make it work better. Silverfort, which is another company in the identity space, a different part of the identity space than Ambit, and Aqua Security, which I think might be interesting because I think a lot of the drivers that are driving Aqua's business, which is cloud native application development and architectures, I think are actually driving the need in the identity space that Ambit's going after.
Well, first of all, I feel awesome because I think Ambit's in really good company. You've hit some organizations that have had massive growth, massive success, and most importantly, solve real problems for our customers. And then I think you were hinting almost at where I wanted to go next is understanding your thesis a bit, in terms of what trends Ambit might be hitting that you think are going to be relevant for the market at large over the coming years.
Yeah. So I actually think, two or three things are what drive security markets. One is the change in the architecture of applications, and I definitely think that's a thing here. The other is a change in the threat model, which I think is also a thing here. Those are two of the biggest drivers, because I think what's happened is that with cloud native applications, people have gotten a lot of utility. You can break things down into smaller parts and manage them differently, but it creates a lot of complexity in a lot of ways. And one way is that if you go from a monolithic application set to a microservices application set, the number of identities that those microservices need balloons quite a bit, probably more than an order of magnitude, maybe two orders of magnitude. So instead of tens or maybe even hundreds at the high end of identities, you probably have thousands or tens of thousands now. And I think the old way of doing identity for machines just won't work. I know there are a lot of companies out there trying to do that, but it's fundamentally different when it's two orders of magnitude bigger. And I think that's driving from the infrastructure side, Ambit's business. The other is that, threat models drive businesses. And I think the resultant threat model from people not being able to adequately manage their non-human identities is there have been some pretty high profile attacks, and that also drives markets. So I think Ambit actually has a foot in kind of both of those things, both a change to the infrastructure and a change to the threat model.
I think that's great. I think the thing I would add in is that there's, in addition to a distribution due to the kind of componentization of software, the locations where the software exists have also expanded dramatically, right? So you've got your cloud, your SaaS, you've still got your on-prem. That's not going anywhere, right?
Yeah.
And so all those places have different ways to manage it.
Yeah, and I think that makes it harder to manage, especially if you're thinking about having a different solution for those different environments, and that ends up creating more attack surface from the perspective of the attacker. So it kind of plays into, I guess it plays into the threat model.
That's right. That's great. Tell us a little bit more about your viewpoint of the NHI market itself. You've made some claims to say why this is going to, why this is and is going to become more important. What do you see happening inside NHI? Is it a one size fits all kind of problem? What kind of variation do you see? What's your view?
Yeah. So one thing about us, we're very thesis driven in the way we do investments. So we looked quite broadly at the NHI market, and we looked at a lot of other players. I actually think it breaks down into two very simple sides of it. One side, which is the side we didn't decide to invest in. I would call it the governance side of the NHI market, which is going and looking at the existing state of affairs in an organization and helping them identify where they've got problems with their identities related to non-humans, and then potentially help them mitigate those. And it kind of makes sense. It turns out if you go do that, you're going to find a ton of problems in almost any organization just because of all that complexity and change that I talked about. The problem comes down to then what do you then do about it? I think trying to fix those problems with the existing infrastructure, which is essentially what those governance solutions are trying to do, fundamentally just won't work. The problem has grown beyond the capabilities of the last generation approach to non-human identity. So the other side of it, and I think Aembit is still relatively unique there and has a great approach, is let's obviate those problems. Let's create an infrastructure for access management for machine identities and non-human identities that doesn't require granular rotating of keys by humans that will break applications, et cetera. And I think that is the kind of thing where what Aembit has can solve the problem at this scale that we now have, given the advent of I guess the dominance really of cloud native applications. So I think that would be like my top level framing is it a government solution that's going to go tell security people or operations people, here's another big set of problems that you've got to go try to solve and then put it in the queue of all the other stuff you're prioritizing that you don't get to, or are you going to fundamentally solve this problem so that you don't have to get into that queue? And I think in the long run, at least to me, it seems obvious what's the better approach.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that we talk to CISOs sometimes, and CISOs can be very direct. They don't have a lot of time to talk, and a lot of times they'll simply say, "Don't give me another dashboard that shows me I have problems, right? Take some of them off the plate for me, and then we can have a real conversation."
Yeah, the way that I think about that. And I have a lot of background in similar types of solutions from the application security space. I was at a company called Apurva for a lot of years, and we had a solution that was a real-time solution that helped people in production. And there are a lot of solutions out there that find problems in your code and tell you about it. And it turns out it takes a long time to fix those, and a lot of those problems don't get fixed. I've come to the conclusion in recent years that a new problem-finding solution for an organization actually has negative utility, because you've already got too many problems to solve. You're going to give me more things to solve, and I'm going to get less overall done with just more noise. And so I've really been trying to prioritize in my work things that solve problems, not things that tell me about problems.
That's a really great perspective. Do you think that's shared with CISOs at large, with security organizations? Are they there, or do you believe that's where they will be?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I actually think there's a little bit of a dichotomy there. When I say that to CISOs, and I say it to almost everyone that I meet, they all nod their head and say, yeah, you're right. And then they actually do go buy more governance solutions a lot of times and that, and it sounds like I'm indicting them for something. The truth is sometimes they have to. Sometimes there's a requirement that they've got to have vulnerability management or something because of a compliance requirement. So, I wouldn't say it's like necessarily, their fault. But I would say mentally, yes, they're very much there, and they're looking for it. And I think the other way you see that coming out is you're starting to see a lot of consolidation in the industry and in security at least. And I think that's because they're looking for ways to simplify what they're doing. But in the end, I think platformization is one thing. I don't know that it's going to take over. I think just having solutions that are very good at the specific problem, but instead of focusing on telling you to do more things, doing some of those things for you is what I think ultimately is going to win out in the market.
You mentioned another thread here that I wanted to pull on for a moment, which is compliance. And I'm curious on your viewpoints on compliance as it relates to NHIs today versus users. How do you see enterprises dealing with those? Do you feel like the requirements are the same, different, and is that going to be how it is in the future, or is that going to change?
Yeah, I honestly think that the most common requirement for NHI with the old way of doing things is impossible to actually meet, which is basically saying that you've got some reportable rotation policy for your keys or other, whatever form your non-human identities take. And I think in some of these organizations with tens of thousands of non-human identities, there's just no way they can actually do that. And I think the Aembit approach obviates that need. And I think, with the shorter term keys that we use, probably a little bit above my pay grade technically, but you don't need to do that because the system's doing it for you. And I think it's going to take a little bit of time for organizations and auditors to realize that. But I think the forward-looking ones, they get it already.
I think that's really interesting. We from the inside of Aembit, we talk about this a lot, right? And we see our proactive customers who are almost already self-policing themselves towards these new models of thinking. Yet at the same time, the letter of the law doesn't require them to do anything new on the non-human side. But we think, and for our benefit and our customers' benefit, we hope that'll change over the course of the next few years.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it takes sometimes the first thing that has to happen is the solution has to be possible. Like we definitely saw this in some of my former companies where the auditors can't really ask people to do things that don't yet exist. So there's a little bit of a back and forth where you have to show people what's possible and what the benefit of that is. And I think we're there now with Aembit. There's a different way. It's a better way. I think it's a dramatically better way, and it will significantly reduce the risk of some of these sort of non-human account compromises that have been happening. And I think the industry will, unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be compliance that drives it. I think what's going to happen is people are going to be responding to the threat, because I think there are going to be more attacks. Once a few that are out there, and there've been a couple of pretty famous ones recently, it's kind of like there's blood in the water, and the attackers tend to, go where the opportunity is. So I'm not happy about it. I'm not rooting for it, but I think it will happen, that they'll do that. And people will probably be more motivated by threat response in this market, is my opinion, than compliance.
That's really interesting as well. And unfortunately, we see both of those pressures on the security team, right? Different kinds and different maybe time scales, if you will. But when we see them getting it from both sides, and we hope we can just make it easier for them to deal with these challenges. Well, Mark, I think that's it. I think this is great. I just wanted to reinforce, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for supporting Aembit. And we're looking forward to doing more of these with you.
Yeah, sounds great.
Thank you.
Aembit, manage access, not secrets.